Always be truthful, honest, be clear and concise. Be upfront, let the insured know what's going on. Handle all claims. I'm not going to say the same because not all situations are the same.
Right.
But you do want to handle them to be fair and concise. Don't go outside of the scope of the policy. Just make sure, everything's understood. You're doing everything as far as that adjuster, what your job entails.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the New Adjuster Podcast Season 2. Very excited that you're joining us today for Episode 7, the penultimate episode of our season, as we are barreling towards the end. We are a little upset about that, but we have had a lot of great subjects up until this point. If you've missed any of those previous episodes, go back and give them a watch or a listen wherever you get your podcasts. So as we get ready to dive into this episode, my name is Murphy. I'm in the Property Training Department here in CNC, and with me, as always, is
Kelsey, Property Claims Manager.
And today's episode is navigating insurance policies as an IA. So again, we have a very special guest today. Arnisha is joining us. So Arnisha, before we dive into the episode, tell us about what you do here at CNC. What's your position, your title? What are your job duties on a daily basis throughout the company?
Okay, so I'm Arnisha here at CNC. I am a desk adjuster. Currently, I handle AOP claims on the Northeast Coast. I have handled weather claims, but mainly I handle the Northeast AOP, water damage, lightning, anything that's not weather related. Most of them have come from New York, New Jersey, up the East Coast. So on a day-to-day basis, let's say I get a new claim, assess the claim, make that first contact with the insured, just get a little backstory of what's going on to fully understand and explain any claim process, anything pertaining to their that loss and that policy, so they can better get a clear understanding in the very beginning.
Awesome.
Gotcha. And when you say AOP, just for, again, our audience here, new adjusters, what does AOP stand for?
All other perils.
Gotcha. So basically anything other than weather-related, right? No wind, no
vandalism.
hail. Yeah, there you go. So a lot of people don't think about that. They think non-weather. They think pipe burst or, something along those lines. But you're right. Theft, vandalism, all that comes into play. So, yeah, good stuff there.
Yep, she is one of our Northeast adjusters, which we don't have many of. So, great licenses to get anywhere on the Northeast.
You want to say that again for everybody listening?
Yeah.
Great license to get.
Great license. It's New York. That's a big one. It's a golden ticket.
That's right.
Absolutely.
And you didn't have yours when you first started here, correct?
I did not. I only had Texas.
Yep.
I begged her.
So I came in as a claims admin with just Texas. When Hurricane Ian hit, I got Florida, and I got transitioned over to a desk adjuster. And from there, I've been working claims. When the CAT event ended, then I transitioned to daily claims.
Yep. And then got the New York license.
Racking up those licenses ever since.
It's funny. We said it on the last episode, too, and we've said it a couple times throughout this season, even last season. It seems like everybody starts out as an admin. Right? Everybody starts out as an admin with maybe their home state or just one state, and then they keep growing. And then, like I said, to get a New York license, that's its own challenges, right?
It really is.
Because it comes with its own test, and you'll make sure that thing never expires, right? I'm the same way.
Literally.
All right, go ahead.
So, what are some common challenges that an IA would face when interpreting insurance policies for a claim?
As an IA, to interpret insurance policies, you need to. The main thing is to understanding the endorsements. Right now, the most common are non-admitted policies, and with those, it prohibits the insured from, during the claims process or with that policy, to retain a public adjuster or sign any contracts with any assignment of benefits. So you have to make sure between the agent that sells the policy, but you also want to make sure that the insured understands those terms and limitations within their policy.
Yeah.
That's a huge challenge because
it is.
You get these insureds who have all these endorsements. They have all these new types of policies that aren't super common. It's not just your regular HO3 to, same old. It's ones that they've agreed to. Maybe they get a lower premium.
Yep.
Maybe they've gotten discounts on it for getting this type of policy.
Yep.
But they've really, I would say 95% of the insureds that we get with non-admitted policies don't know what that means. They don't know that they can't have a PA.
Yep.
They don't know that there's AOB restrictions. They don't know most of what goes on with having that type of policy.
Yeah, and you're exactly right, too. With certain endorsements, exclusions, whatever, that premium comes down or it goes up, and policyholders just aren't aware of that most of the time, right, Arnisha? I mean, they know that they have to have a policy, but they don't really know what goes into it.
Right.
I wouldn't if I didn't do this for a living. You might not either. So yeah, and I think the biggest thing as an adjuster is you have to read the policy, right? Most policies, if you run into HO3, you know that each HO3 is most likely the same if it's the same carrier. But, tell us about that. Like when you get a different policy than the claim you worked previously, how much time do you set aside to go aside and, and read it? Or do you have like a cheat sheet that goes along with it? How do you do that?
Well, first I look to see what state I'm working with because that does make a difference.
That's exactly
Whether it's
right.
Texas, Florida, North Carolina, New York, New Jersey.
Right.
Those endorsements, those states, some are the same, some are different. There may be one key word, such as like the roof loss settlement or the ACV loss settlement. The ACV loss settlement literally strictly pays ACV value.
Mm-hmm.
The loss settlement to roofs with windstorm or hail, if the roof is under 15 years, then there's recoverable depreciation. So if the insured does have that endorsement, the field adjuster will write it as non-RCV. However, if that is under 15, they can submit the documents from when that roof was previously installed. And once we have that on file, then that non-recoverable turns into recoverable. So those two endorsements are important to pay attention to which one that you're working with.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because I know in each state, obviously, there's different legislature. Like you said, there may be one word that changes one endorsement to the next, and/or exclusion, right? Like you talked about with the roof settlement endorsement. So when you are dealing with different types of insurance policies too, what are some of the challenges you have in jumping from one policy to the next, right? Because in your claim queue, you may have, 50 claims assigned to you, say in a catastrophe environment, maybe not even outside of daily. Not all policies are going to be the same. So how do you kind of jump between each of them to make sure they all stay separate? Do you keep your own separate section of notes for each claim or, a ledger pad for each policy? How does that help you, especially in a CAT environment when you have so many on your table?
Well, for me, what works for me, on my desktop, I create a folder. And in that folder, I have a folder for each insured. So I put all of their policy documents, claim documents, anything they submit or maybe a contractor will submit for that claim, and I keep it in the folder. So that's how I'm able to differentiate what goes with what and which policy is what. Because like I said, each state is different. So
very smart.
And somebody
that's what I do.
Arnisha, she handles not just one state.
Right,
a lot of
multiple
people,
states, yeah.
When they come in as a daily desk adjuster or a CAT adjuster, you're handling one state and typically maybe 2 to 3 different types of policies.
Sure.
But Arnisha handles claims in so many different states for us and the carrier that she works for that no two are the same.
Yep.
She could have 20 claims right now and maybe 3 of them had the same type of policy. But keeping up to date, you're working in one. I've seen her. I sit next to her. She sits right next to me. So I look at her computer and she's got a folder. She works on one at a time.
Mm-hmm.
I have never seen confusion. And that helps so much because you get in here, especially as a new adjuster, and you have all these different claims and all these different policies. And it's like, oh my God, I thought I was looking at that last one I looked at 5 minutes ago.
Mm-hmm.
I really do think the biggest tip for that is to shut your brain off. You're working on this claim alone. Only have documents open for this.
Yep.
Even if you get a phone call, tell them, hey, give me 1 minute. You get that stuff out of the way. And you change to a new browser or screen or whatever. But keeping those documents, reading up on it, I just, that's the way I would do it. I know that's the way she does it. So.
Yeah, and I think that's a great tip. Arnisha, you can probably agree with this too, for a new or a seasoned adjuster, right? If somebody's been doing it for 10 years or they just started 10 minutes ago, that's the easiest way to keep everything kind of separate out or separated at least to keep from confusing policies and or claims and things like that. So, yeah. Okay, so Arnisha, on coverage determination letters, as a desk adjuster, we know that's super important. We've talked about it ad nauseum throughout this season. So when you go to write that coverage letter, how important is it to put the policy language in there to help explain your decision? Because not only do you have to understand it, but you have to help them understand it as well when it comes to interpreting that policy.
Well, in the coverage determination letter with that policy language, before we get to that policy language in the letter, we spell out or state out, explain what's covered. If there's anything not covered, there is a paragraph there. So we will reference the policy language as to why that's not covered. You can tell it to them all day, explain it to the insurer. However, sometimes when they read it in black and white, they may get a better understanding to where they can interpret it, to understand, okay, this is why this isn't covered. This is coming from my policy. They're not doing anything outside of their scope of work. They're doing exactly as their job as that adjuster to determine that coverage. And in the beginning, I always let the insurer know, hey, once the process is completed, we have a coverage determination letter. In that letter, it'll state what's covered. Anything that's not covered, we address that as well. So you will receive a letter at the end of the claims process, so they kind of get a better understanding of what's going on and how we reached our determination.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that comes along with that is also the phone call, right? So the phone call a lot of times can help explain that too, because then you can put it in layman's terms, a lot more easily than the actual letter can, right? When you start putting the policy jargon in there and things like that. So, yeah.
Well, even with letters and policy language, you have to be so careful because you're writing that letter. You've got a paragraph that says, hey, these things are not covered for this reason. Your policy language, which says why, is below. But you have to be, cautious when you're putting that policy language in because, the main policy, the HO3 form, has this language, but make sure you check those special provisions or any endorsements because that same exact policy language could be changed to say, this was added to this portion and this is why it's really denied because your special provisions notes this. That's what can be confusing to insureds. They say, no, I have my policy. I'm looking at it. It says this. Yeah, but you have to look at those special provisions to see, this is why it changed. Yeah. This is why this isn't covered. So I think that's a big challenge.
Yeah. You ever keep hard copies of the policies like on your desk, or do they just change so often it's hard to do that?
They do change, but I don't keep one like physically. Once we get that certified copy, then I put that in the insurance folder because that's the best copy to go by in regard to the deck page from when the claim is initially filed.
Yeah. I know a lot of people are different too. Some people like to have that sheet of paper in their hand. Some people like a digital copy. So I thought I'd ask that.
Well, my thing with that is that even if you have the sheet of paper, there are so many endorsements on every policy that it's going to change unless you have a stack of endorsements and a stack of the policy. But at the same time, to her point, this is something, the day and age that we're in now, we can pull up we order a certified copy of every policy. We have the full one. We know it applies to the date of loss. Not only that, but you can open it and Control F and search any word, anything that you may need to add to that letter. You can Control F, search it. So I think that's
hard to do that on a sheet of paper.
Very hard.
And if you got too many sheets of paper, you don't have much of a desk left. So,
and then the deck page doesn't have all the detail as the certified copy as far as the endorsement. So you want that certified copy.
Yeah.
Is that the first thing you look at whenever you get that first, that claim, and you obviously you have the type of policy? Is that the first thing you look at? Is the deck page, kind of give you a snapshot of what's going on?
Yep. I familiarize myself with the deck page. We do have software where we can pull up the full policy as well, just to make sure that's correct. And I go through and depending on the cause of loss and what the insured reported or whoever reported the claim, I do check that endorsement to see what endorsements could possibly apply. Mm-hmm. And then also information on the deck page, if they have a mortgage, and then the deductible, and then also the coverage, the limits of the coverage. So you want to familiarize yourself and go ahead and when you get ready to make that first call, relay all of that information to the insurer so they can kind of get an idea because sometimes it could lead to a withdrawal. Whatever the loss is, it may not exceed their deductible and it'll be under deductible. So they may want to withdraw the claim before an inspection is scheduled or field adjuster goes out.
Yeah. So. And for the folks that aren't aware too, explain to us why that mortgage company is so important.
Well, that mortgage company is important because depending on the loss and what the estimate is written for, there's a certain amount that the mortgage company has to be included on the payment check as far as coverage, a rebill. Yep. If the insurer states that they've satisfied their mortgage, then we need a copy of that satisfaction of mortgage letter in order to not include the mortgage on that payment. So that is very important. So you want to confirm that with them on that initial call, or if they've changed mortgage companies from one company to another, we'll need that letter as well.
Yep. That's exactly right.
Yep, because we don't want to list the wrong one on that payment because...
No, then you create a ping pong match.
Well, especially when a lot of the mortgage companies that you have are not local to you. You'd have to mail it to them, send it back, or when they get the check, they're like, oh my God, I need to start my work, but this is not my mortgage company.
Yep.
That's why the number one thing you ask on, not number one, but one of the big things you ask on that first call.
It's important.
Yeah.
It's so important. Well, that kind of leads me into my next question is, what challenges, do you experience with dealing with, new or evolving types of policies, and how do you adapt to those changes? So I was thinking, kind of like the non-admitted you mentioned earlier. That's a huge challenge because not only are you learning it, but the insurers are having to figure it out too.
Yep. So aside from the non-admitted policies, we do have the condo endorsements, the understanding the loss assessments. Some condo policies, there are limits for loss assessments that the carrier will pay. I've seen some where there's a 5,000 limit or 3,000 limit. So even though you see that endorsement on the deck page, you still want to read the actual page inside the policy to see what was covered. There's also a deductible for the loss assessment as well. So
it's different than
no
what's
matter
on the
how
deck
many
page.
loss assessments, it's all for that one event. So once they've once they've met that limit, the policy is not going to pay over for that assessment. So that is a big one. There's mold testing, pre-testing and post-testing. There's limits for that. So understanding that mold limit as far as a policy. And then also water backup damage. There's limit for water damage. Currently, a lot of our claims are coming through with water damage. So there is a limit. We have to send a water endorsement letter to the insured, so they're aware, it's 10,000 or whatever your limit is, and also inclusive of mitigation. So you do have the option to use a direct repair with your policy, or you can use your own contract. However, those limitations still apply. So it's just understanding those endorsements and understanding your policy of what's going on, so you can
there's a
know
lot
what's
that goes
covered and
into
is
it.
not.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it because you have to be the expert, right? You have to be the one that helps explain that and gets everybody on the same page as the adjuster, whether it's desk or field. So it's not the insured's or the policyholder's responsibility to understand it all A to Z, right? And typically they don't.
So, and everything you just said was like the getting the direct repair stuff set up. There are so many specifics that go along with that. Like, if you do this, then you get this. If you don't do this, you don't get this. And if you do that, you're limited to this. It's so much to remember, but it's our obligation as, insurance professionals to explain that and say, hey, this is, let me break it down for you in layman's terms. Like, this is what this means. Here you go. Here's what you need to do, or here's your options.
Yeah, sometimes you would expect that agent to have went over everything and broke it down for the insured, but they sell the policy, they write the policy and sell it, because there's been times we have to contact the agent to like, hey, this is what's going on. We're trying to explain it to this insured. They're not understanding. Could you maybe step in,
Right.
Maybe they'll hear it different coming from a different perspective or someone else. So,
yeah, because maybe that's somebody they have a better relationship with, right?
Right.
You just met them, right?
Normally they may be local in an office to where they can actually physically see someone, and that does make a difference in understanding.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. So obviously it's not ideal, but a lot of times policy language is open to interpretation, right? It's very ambiguous. How do you deal with those scenarios where it's not clear-cut black and white? Is there some kind of an escalation process, or do you get to make the call? How does that work?
Normally, if there's ambiguities or like a discrepancy, you first, as the adjuster, want to understand the policy and that endorsement, interpret it to where it benefits the insured. Maybe they'll understand it. You can give different scenarios, just break it down to where they can understand and, be truthful and honest in just a clear, concise manner.
Yeah. I mean, I know what we do, we kind of roundtable everything. So, hey, I'm looking at this policy. It looks like it's denying coverage for this. What do you think about it? And I can promise you 3 other people can look at that same policy and they say, oh, no, I think that there's coverage for this. Yep. And then what is our outcome? Whatever benefits the insured the most. Like, that's what we come to. This insurance is for them. If we don't always agree on it, sometimes we reach out to the carrier. Sometimes we just talk amongst each other. But we want to come to the conclusion whatever's best for the insured, right? I mean,
yeah, I think that goes back into that teamwork environment like we always talk about, and round table and ask your neighbor. Everybody had a first day. We've come up with all the different sayings for it, but I think when you talk about round tabling a coverage decision or a policy interpretation, that's important. It's inclusive. It gets everybody on the same page, and it opens somebody's eyes up to something that maybe they haven't really thought about before, and they always thought, well, it's always going to be that. Well, not necessarily. Think about it this way. 2 sides of the coin type deal. So yeah.
Excuse me. Yeah. So my next question is kind of, I kind of want your experience on this. Can you share a memorable scenario where understanding policy language was crucial with a claim?
I had a previous scenario. It was a weather claim. The insurer had the ACV loss settlement endorsement. However, he didn't read the endorsement within the policy, so he wasn't quite understanding as to why we didn't pay any recoverable depreciation for his roof.
Right.
So he went back to say, oh, the agent didn't tell me to read my policy. No one told me to look past the first page. And I was trying to get him to understand, you signed the policy, so I'm sure the agent went over everything, and I tried to break everything down to him. So in that instance, we did have to get the agent involved to, go over that endorsement and what's entitled in his policy and what was covered. So that made him understand better of what was going on.
Yeah.
That ACV endorsement is new.
It is, yeah.
And it's two, you have to know which one you're working
You
with.
have to know so much. You have to know the age of the roof. Their deck page may say, when they sign the policy application, hey, this roof's 10 years old, but then they could have replaced it and it just didn't get updated with their agent.
That's true.
There are so many what-if scenarios or different situations, and those ACV policies get me. Every time I look at them, I'm like, oh, gosh, let's all join and talk about this just to make sure we all agree. Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. Hey, everyone, we are back again for another Fact or Fiction segment here on the podcast. This segment is brought to you by Blue Leopard Agency, a marketing agency that's redefining success in the digital age. Visit blueleopardagency.com today to discover how they can tailor a marketing plan that's as unique as your brand. Don't wait. Take the first step toward marketing success right now. Kelsey, Fact or Fiction?
All right. Our Fact or Fiction today is, as an independent adjuster, the deck page that is in the system loaded there is always the most up-to-date and accurate.
That is straight fiction.
I love
You want to get that certified copy of policy that is going to be the most accurate and up-to-date.
Absolutely.
Yep, because if it's out of date and you're reading it that way, who knows? Changes in endorsements, exclusion, deductibles, everything
Coverage
could
in
change.
general, I mean,
That'll make a big difference.
it's huge.
Yeah.
Plus, like you said earlier, mortgage company, all of the things.
Yep, all of the things. It would be nice if it was the most up to date, but it's just
It
not.
rarely is.
It's just not. All right, let's jump back into part 2 of our interview here with Arnisha. Arnisha, there's always going to be opportunities or situations where you're going to explain a policy endorsement and/or an exclusion or some type of language, whether it's in the beginning or time for the coverage decision, and the insured's just going to vehemently disagree with it. They don't see it the way it is. How do you get over that hurdle? Because inevitably it's going to happen, right?
So you can tell who you're dealing with from that initial call, what type of person, their attitude, you can hear it in their voice. So you can take that and base it off, okay, so this is how it may go during the process of the claim, any questions, just kind of get a feel like the backstory that they tell you. So when you get to that coverage determination, here's how I'm going to approach it. I can explain this way. They'll be able to understand. They may come back with a rebuttal, a disagreement. You can change your approach. Reference policy language, like, look, there's a clause in your policy. I'll read it to you verbatim. I will even send you a copy, a snippet of it. Maybe you can read it in black and white, and you'll be able to better understand it. But there are different ways to approach it. And if they're just in straight disagreement at that time, I mean, hey, let me do some more research, or this is right now. We do have a supplement process. Just go over the different processes and give them the options that they're entitled to as the policyholder.
Yeah, I think one way you can also do it too is, and you can't always do this, but at the beginning of a claim, if you foresee that, hey, this may end up being an issue to where this is not going to be covered, if in fact, sometimes you can head that off in the first or the second phone call. Go ahead and plant the idea, almost like Inception in a way. Plant the idea, and so that way when you get to the end, it's not the first time they've heard it, right? Because that coverage day is that's judgment day for the claim, right? If you drop the hammer on them that day, a lot of times that can cause a big issue. Whereas if you've kind of led up to that point with, hey, I just want to let you know this could potentially not be covered if this, in fact, is the case, a lot of times that will help you. So
yeah, I mean, you can see it from FNOL. We get new claims, that first notice of loss that we get, and they're like, I've had, just an example, water's been leaking from my toilet for the past 3 years, and, we get them. It happens. So on that
You'd be
first phone
surprised.
call, you're like, hey, your insurance policy covers things that are sudden and accidental. Did this just happen? Did it happen 3 years ago and you just kind of been watching it? What's the situation? And say, I just want to let you know up front, this could
Potentially,
we'll send somebody out, send out an expert, whatever it takes. But I mean, with that being said, that way, how does, your advocacy for insureds, being an insured advocate, because that's what we essentially are, how does that and, empathy come into play when you're talking about policy limitations or settlements, et cetera?
Well, in any claim situation, no matter the situation or what happened, you want to be empathetic, remain professional, unbiased, let them get their frustrations out, try to get a feel of what's going on. Just let them talk it out, listen to them, and then ask them, how can I help you? So you want to, let them talk it out, go over everything, remain professional, and that way, you can tackle head on any type of challenge that can help you with your next claim. This is how I handle, this is the approach that I use, and it seems to be very helpful. It didn't cause any confusion. So just kind of, it's like a learning moment within itself as far as preparing yourself for the next claim or the next insured.
Right.
It really is. Like, I've learned not only from myself and phone calls that I make, but by sitting in the office and listening to other people and how they come to certain decisions or what they do or how they speak to an insured. Because a lot of times I've seen, from my experience, that if you just let them spill their guts to you, you let them talk it out, and they're like, I'm sorry, this isn't about you. This is so aggravating. And you're like, no, I understand. This is, hard, difficult situation. But this is, ultimately the decision. It's ultimately in the policy. We are going by what's in that. But a lot of times letting them talk it out, letting them air the issues that they have, kind of, they're like, oh, God, I got that off my chest. I'm good. And then they're like, okay, I get it, and move on with your life.
Yeah.
Seen that a lot.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong, too, with telling that policyholder, hey, when your policy comes up for renewal, take this into consideration now. Now that you know this, maybe you can get an endorsement for it. Or, maybe you can adjust it in some way. You think your deductible's too high, explain to them the opportunity that, hey, if you pay a little higher premium, your deductible comes down. Nothing wrong with explaining that as the adjuster, so.
Yeah, but at the same time, you got to let them know, hey, you still got to fix this before your policy's going to
we will
cover it in the future.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely, no doubt.
We've got photos. We've got, we can tell if this
Run
was
reports
prepared.
to know the prior claims. That does play a factor in filing a new claim. Hey, did you get these past damages repaired? You're filing a claim for the same damages, same area. Are these the same existing damages, or are they new? If they're new, you need to provide proof that they've been repaired, because it does play a part in this new claim determination, because the policy will not indemnify for those same damages that you did not get repaired from your last loss. So,
because it literally, there is policy language in almost every single insurance policy, exclusion for existing damages.
Yep.
I mean, that's a huge one. If we know that those were existing either prior to your policy inception or prior to this claim, different policies read different ways. Some are one or the other or both, but plays a huge part in it for sure.
Yeah, so you've obviously worked a lot of different states, a lot of different types of policies, a lot of different types of losses. So a couple quick one-word answers here. Would you rather work AOP or weather claims?
weather.
What's the easiest policy to interpret?
Ooh, HO3.
Okay. What's the easiest endorsement to explain?
For me, the ACV loss settlement.
Easiest.
That's the easiest?
That's like, look, you're just basically paying the actual cash value. There's no recoverable depreciation, not depending on the age, anything. This is what you're going to get for the roof. That's it.
Yeah. What is the hardest exclusion to explain? The most difficult one to have to tell somebody about?
From experience, I want to say the non-admitted, because so I can't have a public adjuster to represent me. I kind of got to do this on my own, but I'm like, hey, this is the endorsement in the policy. That's what we're abiding by. We're fulfilling the obligations under the policy. There's nothing we made up. So it's here in layman's term, plain black and white, for you to read, for me to relay that information to you as well.
Yeah, good stuff.
With that one too, with the PA, there's different things, because you literally can't contact the PA at all. You get that LOR, they're calling you back to back to back, and you can't even answer the phone for them and say, hey, I can't talk to you. They have an anti-PA endorsement. You have to pretend like they don't exist.
Strictly talk with the insured, and they have to send us, we have to send in a rescission letter with that PA. Now, whether they send it,
that's a whole nother story.
But we're doing our job is, sending the letters to have them to send in that rescission letter.
Is that the toughest one? Was that what that was?
Yeah. Toughest exclusion.
That one's definitely
I don't understand.
Last one, little quick questions. What is the most difficult state to work in?
Drum roll. Sorry, that didn't.
I'm going to say New York, especially if they have a PA, because once that PA get involved, then they're needing. But before any payments, they have to send in a regulations 10. It's just a whole different ball game.
Those Reg 10s are.
Because they tell you how to pay, what
Talk
to
more
pay.
about that
where
real
it's
quick,
going.
Kelsey. What is that?
Reg 10 is a form, Regulation 10 form, that if they have a PA, we have to send our offer to them. They send us this Reg 10 form back and say, we have to agree on the amount that you pay before you can pay anything.
All of it.
All of it.
Yep.
And then that Reg 10 form comes in with the PA, make this payment out to the B, make this payment out to the insured, make this payment out this way. And we have to abide by that Reg 10, and we cannot issue payments until that's received.
Yeah.
It's insane.
It is. And that's the only state that I'm aware of that requires the Regulation 10 form
I mean,
when the PA is involved.
Yeah. I mean, it almost kind of makes it easier, though, because you're like, hey, this is, it's best. It benefits the insured. It benefits the PA. They're doing work on the claim.
The insured has to sign that as well.
Exactly.
To know what's being paid here. They're not getting taken advantage of. Because it happens.
It does.
Happens.
You never know certain claim situations, but I think the Reg 10 is almost beneficial for everyone because you're not overpaying something. You're offering an amount that the loss is worth. They're agreeing to it. I don't know. It's different for sure.
Yeah. And I can't come back and say, well, we believe this is this, but because you signed this Reg 10 agreeing to this amount, so that's what we're paying.
Kind of like a release.
Signed and notarized release agreement.
Yeah. Is it notarized, the Reg 10?
No. You don't have to just sign from the insured and the PA.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, can you discuss the role of technology or software that you may use when, deciphering policy language, clauses, endorsements? Is there any software or technology that you used?
There are different software systems, technology out there where you can access the policies uploaded. You can see premium changes, any added endorsements, if the policy is non-renewal, any kind of updates for that policy and insured, but you'll see it in real time because the agent will be able to upload that in, I guess you would say a portal, but it'll be accessible once you have login credentials as the adjuster to be able to view those documents.
And that's typically put in by the carrier, right? Or put together by the carrier, I should say. Yeah.
So I think what she's referencing is like an actual policy system. So each carriers are going to have a different one. They may have more than one. But you go in and it's accessed by the agent. It's where their agents submit the policies there. So any phone calls that agents make, any letters that are sent out, they're all there. So you can see if a non-payment letter was sent to the insured. Hey, your policy was actually canceled due to non-payment. This letter was sent out to you on this date. That's all accessible, and it's huge to have that software for sure.
Yep, absolutely. So as a new adjuster, somebody coming in brand new, what is some tips and advice that you would give them when it comes to interpreting policies? I know when I first started and I saw the first policy, I didn't know what I was looking at or where to find things. So how would you assist them, or what tips would you give somebody that's brand new, when they start getting claims and they have to learn how to interpret policies? What's the easiest way they can do that?
Depending on what's going on, you can search, like Kelsey mentioned earlier, you can Control F search a specific word in the policy. For example, for wind-driven rain in the policy, you will look up sand. And therefore, you can go in that policy and you can find that. You can look up that endorsement on a Texas wind hail policy. However, it's listed on the deck page, but there are some that does allow wind-driven rain, so you have to read that endorsement. Yeah. And then there's some that excludes wind-driven rain from the policy, no storm credit opening. You just have to be able to familiarize yourself and just be determined, be proactive, will to succeed, and stay up to date on any changes.
Yeah, all good tips.
There's always like a keyword you can search for.
Yep.
Like she said, sand, because what she's quoting is wind or sand, water, steam, etc. That enters not through a storm credit opening, and you have to. It really comes with practice, I feel like, because you're looking at that policy and you're like, okay, what did I find it under? Because it's not as simple as you think. It's not as black and white as you think. It is a very long document that you're searching through. It helped me when I first started, like you said earlier, by printing it out and reading it.
Yep.
However, at that time, the carrier I worked for only had a couple policies.
Right.
But I've seen them have 10, 20, 30 policies, different types. So it's really helpful to find something that works for you, whether that's printing it out, whether that's finding your keywords, finding, different scenarios. Because I say that because you're looking for a keyword, it may be listed there, but you got to press enter about 5 times and see how many more times that same thing, or if it's changed in the special provisions.
If it's under the perils insured against, then you have an exclusions section, so you do have to keep entering through there for all of that.
Yep.
Wade through the water.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we had an adjuster that worked here at CNC. This was a couple years ago for a particular carrier. They had a situation where every coverage letter they wrote, they saved it and kind of extracted all the information to say this was covered, this was not, based on this policy language. And they just kept a running, basically like a cheat sheet on like an Excel form, and just kept it going that way. So if they ever had it again, they could always go back to it and say, all right, on this type of policy, this is why it was not covered and this is where it said it. So it helped them not only remember it, but I'm the same way. If I type something or write something, it's more likely to stick with me. So that's even a tip for new adjusters too.
Yeah, we kind of do the same thing. This is a partial denial for wear and tear, or partial denial due to long-term damage, water damage, or this is a full denial, wear and tear, deterioration that's excluded from the policy. There is verbiage. So I do have a folder that I keep those letter templates in to use depending on the state.
You got lots of folders.
I do. I like to be organized.
Nothing wrong with that.
Nothing organized.
Yeah.
I love it though, because you can also reference, like, when I was writing a lot of coverage letters at one point, I would actually have an Excel spreadsheet that said that same scenario, but then list like the insured's name or the claim number. That way I could go back and reference and find that, get the Word document from there. I'm like, all right, well, I already have that. I just handled one like that last week. What are some ethical considerations that adjusters need to keep in mind when interpreting policies and making claim assessments?
On the more ethical side, always be truthful, honest, be clear and concise. Be upfront, let the insured know what's going on. Handle all claims. I'm not going to say the same, because not all situations are the same.
Right.
But you do want to handle them to be fair and concise. Don't go outside of the scope of the policy. Just make sure, everything's understood. You're doing everything as far as that adjuster, what your job entails.
That makes sense, because when I'm thinking of an ethical dilemma that you can come across with policy language. Like I mentioned earlier, you get an insured that says, my toilet broke 3 years ago and I hadn't fixed it. It could be a very ethical dilemma, but when you have to, abide by the laws in your state, you could say, hey, are you, like I said, are you sure that this happened 3 years ago? Because your policy says this, because you automatically know. I've had this situation happen more than once where they're like, oh, yeah, I wasn't sure on that first phone call. This actually happened last week. They change it up, switch up, and you come back and you're like, oh, well, this is now going to be a covered loss because they changed, even when it comes to the date of loss, that you say, hey, this day of loss actually happened after your policy was canceled.
Right.
Oh, well, maybe it didn't happen then. It happened a month or two ago. Those are very ethical dilemmas that you may want to then go get a recorded statement, send a reservation of rights,
Yep.
It happens every single day.
Yep, because I had an instance, it was a fire claim. They were doing illegal activities, and we had to get legal involved, so.
What kind of illegal activities?
Drugs.
Prohibited from the policy.
Man.
They were. And it wasn't the insured, it was
Let's
his
put a
tenant.
rating on this
it
episode.
wasn't the insured, it was his tenant, although he was prohibited from turning into an Airbnb, but there was one specific thing, he didn't sign the application, so it allowed for coverage. In New York.
That's interesting.
With the PA.
So it just got more sticky as you kept
It was
awful.
the ickiest of stickiest.
It really was.
Oh, jeez. Yeah,
I think it was my first New York claim, and I'm like, y'all just hit me with a big one.
We hit you
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
big guns on day one.
Got your license and then this one.
Yep.
I hear you.
That's it. I mean, but it happens.
All right, so Arnisha, as we wrap up here, and we ask every guest this, so we'll obviously pose the same question to you. What is the number one tip that you would give new adjusters as they get into this field? Number one tip coming from you.
For me, the number one tip would be always be open and willing to learn new things. Every carrier is different, so no matter where you work, you want to learn their processes. Take something from your previous experience and bring it to your new experience. You can also always maybe help someone out. It could be a seasoned adjuster or someone. They may learn something from you. So always be willing to learn and adapt new changes. And
Adapt is a great word, though, because, you could work at different TPA firms or different, carriers or whatever. And, it's not always going to be the same. You're going to come into a situation, you're like, well, I did it this way. You can't come into with that mindset.
Yeah.
I used to do it this way. This is how this carrier did it. And no, you need to learn this carrier. Learn how to do this. Be open-minded, like you said. I love that answer because that is so true.
Yep, I would agree 100%.
All right. Well, thank you for being with us today, Arnisha. I loved this.
Yeah,
Had a
Arnisha, we
great
really
time.
appreciate it. Yeah, we hope to
You're
have you
welcome.
back, obviously. Very excited that you joined us. I know I speak for Kelsey and myself. Fantastic guests. A sort of difficult subject or, more, challenging subject to talk about, but I thought you did fantastic. It's great, too, that you do it every single day in multiple states. So you were a fantastic guest, and obviously we appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Arnisha.
Thanks, Arnisha.
Hey everybody, we just wrapped up a fantastic segment with Arnisha as we go into our Mythbuster of the week. Our Mythbuster this week is sponsored by CNC Connect. CNC Connect is fast approaching, taking place January 8th through the 10th here in downtown Mobile, Alabama. Whether you're a beginner or a seasoned adjuster, this event is an excellent opportunity to boost your knowledge in claims. We have a lineup of very accomplished guest speakers and ample chances for networking. Our early bird tickets are on sale now for just $99, and our VIP tickets are $149. Visit cncconnectconference.com for your tickets today. So, Kelsey, our common myth or misconception of the week is that all homeowners policies are the same.
Myth. I mean, I think we went over that so many times today, but there are so many different variables, instances that come into play with endorsements, exclusions, et cetera, non-admitted policies, HO policies, HO3, HO6. So many of them.
Yeah, and it's just so much different because, like on the flood side, it is all the same policy, just different forms, whether it's dwelling, general property, RC, BAP, but it's all the same. The language is all the same across the board. But homeowners is just so different, like you said, because of states and endorsements, exclusions, all this kind of thing, there's so much variation in there that it can change one policy to the next. So no, they're definitely not all the same.
Not at all.
Hey everybody, and thanks again for giving us a watch and or a listen today on our episode as we look forward to the season finale of season 2 of the New Adjuster podcast. We go into mastering file reviews as an independent adjuster. So very interesting subject that we are very much looking forward to diving deeper into. Again, we had a very special guest today in Arnisha, and we obviously are very thankful that she joined us, as well as thankful that you joined us today, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
We also look forward to seeing you at CNC Connect. Thanks, y'all.